Thanks, Morgan. That was great. And you actually touched upon a couple things that I'm going to speak about in terms of connections and land types, which are critical for urban forestry, of course. Before I get going, though, I'm going to take a speaker's privilege and ask Gary, Beth Leary, and Lori Geller to stand up for a minute. And I want to, please do. I want to thank you guys for putting this together. Gary, please stand up, please. It is just a great, fantastic thing. And I also want to put in a note of personal thanks. Behind the scenes, when this was supposed to happen in October or November, I think yours was like a week or two after our symposium, I found out that this was going to happen. I was like, oh my God, the National Academies, nobody's going to come to our symposium. So I made some calls, and I just want to thank you in front of all these folks to say thanks so much for adjusting that. I didn't order up the storm that came through. That pushed it even back further, but I think the outcome was great. So, but anyway, you know, we're talking about management now. We've been wowed by researchers and all the great cutting edge stuff. It's kind of like going into Macy's and seeing the great dresses and the suits and going, oh, this is great. Now, all of a sudden, we find ourselves in the loading dock. So the loading dock is kind of what keeps that stocked, right? So that's what we're going to try to talk about here. City of Trees, so let's see, how do we get this going? And I'm going to speak about it in terms of the right button. Oh, there we go. I'll be speaking today in terms of Washington, D.C., which is a great lab, 69 square miles, small, manageable, pretty much a homogeneous land type. We don't struggle in D.C. with those metaphysical questions of, is it an urban area or a community, that kind of stuff. You know, we don't have to deal with that, which is really great. You know, we've got a tree canopy goal. We have, you know, communities that are fairly well mapped out. But above and beyond all that, we have an incredible history of trees. The city itself, as you probably know, if you don't, it was designed around trees. Pierre L'Enfant designed the city in 1790. One of the little tidbits of information that my friends from the Urban Forestry Administration know all too well is most people's front yards in the district are owned by the district. And those front yards are called public parking. It's not where you put your car. It's a park. It's supposed to be a place where you plant a tree, and it gives the district all of its canopy. Now, he did that great design, and he was canned right afterward. So that kind of gives you also an idea of how respected people are who really love green, right? And we all are in the trenches on this. People don't think about trees and green spaces as much as they do ambulance, fire, public services. We have a lot of competition. We have to think smart about what we do. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I am going to say that just a couple of weeks ago, the mayor, Mayor Gray, he launched, well, he didn't launch the tree canopy goal, but he really gave it a lot of je ne sais quoi. The prior administration launched the 40% tree canopy goal, but Mayor Gray really gave it a lot of oomph. He said we're going to plant 8,600 trees a year, which is what we need to do to attain that goal. He gave it some numbers. It's not a million tree campaign. It's not sexy, 216,000 trees in 20 years, but it's the right management thing to do. We make it sexy other ways by newsletters and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, that's what million tree campaigns are good about. They really make things sexy. But the thing about DC's tree canopy, and we've got a lot of data, that's the other thing, it continues to decline like a lot of other urban areas across the country, okay? Why is that? Okay, well, we've got the new urbanism, right? And they talk about that one word that we all know so well. And in the mayor's sustainability plan, they talk about increasing population. They want density. Density is good. It's energy efficient. You can put 100 families in an apartment complex. Pardon me. You can heat and cool that apartment complex much more efficiently than if there were 100 single-family suburban homes. I think we agree with that. But on the density side, we also have feedlots in Nebraska that's not really good density either. Okay, so how much density do we want? Okay, how much density can we use? How healthy is that density for us in the long term? Okay, and what's happening in the district is development is eating our lunch. Okay, here's another one, and then the big Fort Lincoln Costco where we actually had an opportunity to do a really good development. Okay, we could have squished all the development into one corner of that lot. The rest could have remained forested. It would have been a great model, but politics got the best of it, okay? And that's what we have as a result. And this is happening across the country. And I'm sure Dave showed you the slide. I think one One city here actually saw an increase in canopy in Syracuse. That's because Dave's there. Um, Otherwise, it would have went down really low. But again, there's no mystery to this. Impervious surfaces are going up. When we have hard deforestation, okay, trying to reclaim that is so difficult to do. It costs millions of dollars. And we actually did, the Urban Forestry Administration did a fantastic job in DC with an ARA grant over the past couple of years, stripping that stuff out and putting in trees. And it was really powerful, but it costs a lot of money. And if you need an economic collapse to get a grant every time, I mean, we're going to be in bad shape. So we need to build this stuff into our cityscapes, our planning. We have to plan more smartly than we are now, and we're not doing it. So the question is, how do we fight a smarter battle? Because we're losing that war. We're losing those benefits. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And this is our experience at KC Trees, okay? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, okay? Goes through the 6 steps. I'm actually going to skip over a couple of things that Morgan covered really well. But inventory, the condition, and the extent. The extent are the eyes in the skies. You've seen Jarlath's great work, and you've heard about other folks who are doing this kind of thing. We've heard about the U4 analysis to find out what the composition of that forest is. So it's not just, how much do you have? Is it healthy? Is it worthwhile keeping? So on and so forth. The problem is most jurisdictions lack the money to do these urban canopy assessments. And we need to start to step up from a federal level and do them more systematically, I think. There's no urban forest inventory standards. And we have to keep our mind on what this data means, not to us, not to the wonks in the room, but to the constituent base. Because I think we're losing our urban publics, and I mean that. I see it. An extreme case, I'm going to go into all the details, but it started way back in 2000 when KC Trees was established. We had a 30-meter pixel resolution. It showed tree canopy decline. It created KC Trees. It was very powerful and very potent. Then we went back as an organization. We spent 75 grand. We did a canopy assessment. We found 35%. The year after, the Forest Service said, we've got new data, we've got new techniques, let's do another one. Okay, they found 36%. In 2011, we conducted another analysis through the Forest Service. They said, oops, we screwed up in 2006. It was actually 38%. We underestimated, okay? And in 2011, it went down 2%. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. Between 2006 and 2011, our economy was on fire. The state bird of Washington, D.C. was the crane. That's what the city administrator said, and he was absolutely right. Okay, there's some rationale to why the canopy went down. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, okay? Anyway, another study was funded at the same time concurrently, okay? We're trying to get good data, found 38%. We redid that, found out, well, maybe it wasn't right after all. We've got too much data. This is what's going on. The average Joe Sixpack on the street just wants to water his oak leaf hydrangea and be in a grain neighborhood. We've got to be careful with our numbers. We've got to be careful about what we're putting out there because we're going to lose our urban publics. That's what we don't want to do. It's really important that we keep our eye on that. What are some of the opportunities? Again, can we please establish some national standards? I know I've gotten pushback on this, but if we can have a standard for climbing up in a tree and planting a tree, we can have a standard for monitoring our tree canopy. We can have it, okay? There's enough brain power in this room to take us to the moon and back. We can get a standard. We can absolutely do that. And what about a clearinghouse? About what are the goals? What are the inventory data? What's it out there? Because I get calls all the time from across the region and sometimes across the country, and they say, what do we do to inventory this stuff? We're just KC Trees. We're a local nonprofit. We've got some thoughts and ideas, but these are the things we should be pushing upstairs to you guys, okay? And can we please engage in a program? We have these big regional grants that are going out, $500,000 and so on and so forth. Can't we do an eye in the sky imagery, satellite imagery of all major U.S. cities, particularly on the East Coast because that's where we are. We want to save some money, but can't we do that? Sure, we can do that. We just need the political will to do that. We don't have it yet, but we've got to get there. We have the resources. There's no reason why we shouldn't be doing that. Okay, number 2, set tree canopy goals. This is a real doozy. Okay, I think Morgan had mentioned the ability of us as urban foresters to do what we do today. I never thought I'd see it in my career. I really did not. Eyes in the sky, understanding canopy at a local level. I mean, it's really incredibly powerful, okay? But let's face it too, a lot of jurisdictions don't want tree canopy goals. Is that surprising? No. I was an urban forester for a couple cities in the US, or jurisdictions, not big cities, but the last thing I wanted to do was to tell my boss, who a lot of times was the mayor, I can achieve this goal knowing that from one year to the next, I don't know what my budget's going to be. That's dangerous. It's dangerous for your career. It's a bad career move, okay? So think about that, right? And then the big one is, what should the goal be? People call up and say, hey, what was your goal? I said, well, our goal is 40% because we thought we had 36%. We actually had 38%. And we said, well, if we set it at 38%, that's really not all that inspiring. That's what Million Tree campaigns are. They're fundraising tools. They work really well for nonprofits. We said, okay, 40%, because it was doable, because we thought we could plant about 8,600 trees a year. And when I say we, I mean the royal we. Casey Trees can't do that. We put about 2,000 in the ground. Most of those trees get put in the ground by the Urban Forestry Administration. Department of the Environment are other players that we work with, okay? But, and I love this slide. I am absolutely in love with this slide. I sleep with this slide next to my bedside. And you know something? You should too. You know why? It says why we should have 40%, okay? It's not an environmental analysis, because environmental analyses say, okay, well, if you have 100% tree canopy in Washington, D.C., and you pee up there, if you go down here, you can drink the water and it'll be clean. But nobody's going to do that, right? Because it's not going to be all forest, right? What's it going to be? Okay, so you have to ask yourself the question, what's the big benefit? When you talk to people on the street, they say, well, trees clean the air, they clean the water. Maybe in this crowd they do, but most people say, trees are beautiful, they inspire me, they make me feel good. The environmental benefits are important. We have to keep a focus on that. We also have to be realistic about what we're trying to tell people to do. People love trees because trees are pretty, and that's okay. And guess what? They also reduce our stress, all right? And what this slide is saying, quite simply, is at about 40%, the cortisol levels in your blood go down. Now, this isn't me speaking, a scientist told me this. The cortisol levels in your blood go down, so you calm down. And guess what? You don't sweat as much, okay? So when you're in an area with trees, you feel better. I used to live in Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, okay? So I walked out of my apartment into the south end of Central Park. I didn't need a shrink to tell me I felt better, but I did. That's what this slide says, okay? This slide says I really did feel better. It tells me that. We need more slides like this, folks, okay? We need to fund research to validate what that goal should be. I think you mentioned it earlier, okay? How many trees should be outside of a hospital room? Because policymakers don't want to hear, more is better. They won't buy that because they have fire, they've got schools, they've got all kinds of stuff, okay? We have to deal within that milieu. And let's provide some guidance to jurisdictions, big and small. Engage strategies. Morgan actually covered a lot of this, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but I will put a plug into tree canopy, or not tree canopy, but tree preservation and protection laws. They form the basis for any jurisdiction's success or failure with trees, I feel, that I've seen, okay? We need to have some kind of a protection mechanism for trees, not just in the public space, but in the private space. And I tell this story again and again, and if you've heard it, I apologize, but I want to say it one more time. When I was a kid, my father would change the oil in his car. It was a 50-something Chevy. He loved the thing. It had like 45 quarts. It was a huge engine. He'd say, hey, Mark, I'm changing the oil in the car. He didn't have to tell me what to do. The EPA guys are here. I might get arrested, but I'll tell you anyway. So I'd go, okay, I would know what to do. He didn't have to tell me. I'd go dig a hole in the backyard. He'd pour all the crankcase oil in there, and I'd cover it up. That was a long time ago, okay? So there's a statute of limitations on idiocy, all right? But people go in the backyard and they cut down 20-inch diameter healthy oaks all the time. Do they think about what that does to the neighboring properties or the community? We have not advanced yet as a culture to understand that pouring oil in your backyard can be just as deleterious to yourself and to your neighbors as cutting down that tree. We can no longer do this. We've got to teach folks how to do that, okay? So, and we do that by laws, okay? We've got to have some laws. I just talked a little bit here about how each sector plays a supporting role. Morgan talked about this really well. I'm not going to go into it. I am going to show you what it's like in Washington, D.C., though. It's hard. It's really hard to work through this, okay? We need more coordination. And in DC, we have the added benefit of having federal lands, okay? So we got public lands, we got private lands, we got federal lands. The feds, they don't want to talk to anybody. They've got their own land, they've got their plans, they don't want to do anything. We got to get past this, okay? What can we do to make it better, okay? Synthesizing information about tree protection laws in a way that communities will understand and perpetuate those laws, okay, I think is very, very important. And secondly, maybe we can have some federal dollars that will facilitate connections between non-governmental organizations, governmental organizations, community groups in the local areas, a specific target for that. Send out professional facilitators. I love urban foresters, folks, but we're lousy facilitators. We need some pros to work on this kind of thing. I think it would be incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. Report progress, okay? It's easy, it's really controversial, and there's really not a lot of consistency about what happens. Consistency is very difficult, okay? We're also tend to not be really good communicators for the most part. I mean, we didn't get into science of forestry and all that kind of stuff because we like talking to people. It's not necessarily part and parcel of who we are. But what about a national registry, okay? Something that's updated every 5 or 10 years, okay? And put out there, not just buried in a report somewhere and stuck on a shelf someplace. Because there's a lot of jurisdictions call Casey trees up and they say, well, you know, what is your canopy goal? What is your, you know, they ask these questions and it's hard for us to answer. We've got fairly good data for DC. But they're looking to us to set the bar, okay? They're looking to you to set the bar, to guide them. There's very little guidance out there for these jurisdictions. What if we had something like this, okay? Planting targets that were tied to a canopy goal, okay, and published, that would be pretty powerful, wouldn't it? And I know we have some of this stuff, but the reports are, you know, 2-point font. We've got to communicate these informations to other folks. And report cards. Report cards are a good thing. They scare people, okay? They have negative impacts in some ways. But report cards actually say if you're achieving something or not. That's why, you know, if you got kids out there, I got a couple small ones, you know, they come back with a report card and I say, okay, you either you practice your trumpet or you didn't. And if you didn't practice it, you didn't get a good grade. So you got to start blowing that trumpet some more. It's really as simple as that. We don't have anything like this. We need these kinds of things. And 5 and 6, assess, modify strategies, blah, 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 and repeat. Okay, so filling the gaps, setting some national standards for urban canopy assessments. I think we can do it. We need them. Create and publish state and national registries, okay, about canopy and impervious surfaces. I think when Dave came out with that slide, I think I'm one of many, many hundreds of people who use that slide across the country. It was illuminating. We need more of that. We need to target our research to establish guidelines. Why 20%? Why 30%? Why 40%? We've got to figure that out. Nationwide tree canopy assessments would be fantastic. It would reduce jurisdictional costs tremendously. It would help people out tremendously. It wouldn't cost that much because we're buying a lot. When we worked with Jarlath to do the whole COG area, the price was really quite reasonable, okay? And prices are going down anyway. We can do it in the COG region. We can do it up and down the East Coast, the West Coast, wherever it needs to be done. And facilitating linkages, I mentioned that. It's something I think we really need to focus in on. But I want to leave you on a high note, okay? And that is that the planting target for DC is 8,600 trees per year, okay? So in 2009, we planted 6,000, 2010, 8,600. 2011, we really kicked it. 13,600 trees. Again, that's everybody. It's the district, it's the nonprofit, it's the feds. My view is a lot of reason why that happens because we were communicating, we were setting goals, we were talking about it. We were putting this out in the open, okay? And we really helped to motivate folks. 2012, not all the numbers are in yet. It's about 8,000, 9,000 and change. Okay, and then look at the canopy differences. Okay, now this is the satellite imagery. We planted those trees in Langdon Park about 6 years ago. You can see the accretion. They're elms. Okay, you can also see there's some other trees on the right-hand side that we planted as well. They're doing lousy. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But you're seeing tree canopy increases, and this is it on the ground. Okay, we're going to get there, folks. But we've got to do it, I think, in a smarter way. We have to give people clear guidance as to how to get to places. And we've got to start to think about how do we communicate our information broadly in order to get more people on board with who we are and what we do. Thanks so much.